I used to think I had everything figured out, or at least as figured out as someone like me could hope for. I wasn't rich, I didn't have some picture-perfect life, but I had stability, I had routine, and most importantly, I had my daughter. Her name is Lily. She's 9 now, but back then, when all of this started unraveling, she was 8. Right at that age where she still held my hand in public, but was starting to ask questions I didn't always have answers for. Questions about her mom mostly. Questions I'd been dodging for years. I told her what I thought was enough. That her mom wasn't ready to be a parent. That she left when Lily was a baby. That it wasn't Lily's fault. I rehearsed those lines so many times they stopped feeling like lies, even though parts of them definitely were. The truth is, I never really understood why her mom left. Her name was Rachel. We met in our early 20s in Phoenix. I was working construction. She was waitressing at this little diner off Camelback Road. She had this energy, loud, sarcastic, kind of reckless in a way that made you feel alive just standing next to her. We weren't the take it slow type. Within a year, she was pregnant. I stepped up, or at least I tried to. We moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment. Nothing fancy. Thin walls, old carpet, neighbors who argued too loud, but it was ours. I remember assembling the crib with my hands shaking because it suddenly hit me that I was about to be responsible for another human being. Rachel, she changed during the pregnancy. Not in the glowing, peaceful way people talk about. She got distant, irritable. Sometimes she'd just stare out the window for long stretches like she was somewhere else entirely. I tried asking her what was wrong, but she'd brush it off or snap at me for overthinking. When Lily was born, something shifted even more. Rachel loved her, I know she did. You could see it in the way she held her sometimes, like she was afraid to let go. But there was also this detachment, like she was playing a role she hadn't signed up for. And then one night, about 3 months after Lily came home, Rachel packed a bag and left. No huge fight, no screaming. Just gone. She left a note. I still have it somewhere, though I haven't looked at it in years. It didn't explain much. Just said she couldn't do this. That Lily deserved better. That I'd be a good father. I remember sitting on the edge of the bed holding that piece of paper while Lily cried in the other room, and I felt like my entire life had just split open. After that, it was just me and Lily. I learned everything the hard way. How to warm bottles at 2 a.m. without fully waking up. How to rock her just right so she'd stop crying. How to tell the difference between her hungry cry and her something's wrong cry. I messed up a lot, but I showed up. Every single day, I showed up. My parents helped where they could, but they lived a couple hours away, so most of it fell on me. I worked long hours, juggled babysitters, cut corners wherever I had to. There were nights I'd fall asleep on the couch with her on my chest, too exhausted to even make it to the bedroom. But we made it work. Years passed, and slowly things settled into something that felt normal. We moved out of the apartment into a small house in Mesa. Nothing big, 2 bedrooms, a tiny backyard, but it felt like progress, like stability. Lily started school, made friends, got into drawing and those little science kits she'd beg me to buy at Target. People would ask about her mom sometimes. Other parents, teachers, even Lily's friends when they were old enough to notice. I kept it simple. She's not in the picture. Most people didn't push beyond that. Lily, though, she started asking more around age 6. At first, it was small things. What did mommy look like? Does she like cartoons? Stuff like that. I'd answer what I could without going too deep. I showed her a couple pictures. Rachel had this wild brown hair and a smile that made you forget everything else. Lily got that smile. Then the questions got harder. Why did she leave? I'd always pause at that one. Not because I didn't have an answer, but because I didn't know how to say it in a way that wouldn't hurt her. So I kept it vague. Sometimes adults make choices they don't fully understand. That seemed to satisfy her, for a while. Life wasn't perfect, but it was ours, and I convinced myself that the past was behind us, that whatever Rachel had run from, it was over. Until the day it wasn't. It was a Tuesday. I remember that clearly because Tuesdays were my early days. I'd pick Lily up from school around 3:15. We'd usually stop for ice cream or grab something quick before heading home. That day, she was talking nonstop about some group project, waving around a piece of construction paper like it was the most important thing in the world. I was half listening, smiling, doing that thing where you nod and throw in "no way" at the right moments. Everything felt normal. We pulled into the driveway around 3:40. I noticed the car first. It was parked just off the curb, a dark blue sedan I didn't recognize. Not one of the neighbors. It wasn't blocking anything, just sitting there. At the time, I didn't think much of it. People park on the street all the time. Could have been someone visiting next door. We got out. Lily ran ahead like she always did, backpack bouncing against her shoulders. I followed, juggling my keys and my phone, already thinking about what I was going to throw together for dinner. And then I saw him. He was standing on my porch, just standing there like he belonged. Mid-30s, maybe early 40s, taller than me by a couple inches, clean-shaven, short dark hair, wearing jeans and a button-down like he'd put some thought into looking presentable. His posture was stiff, like he'd been waiting a while. My first instinct was irritation.
You don't just show up at someone's house unannounced. Not like that. Lily slowed down when she saw him, instinctively stepping closer to me. I felt her hand slip into mine, her fingers tightening just a little. "Can I help you?" I called out, keeping my voice steady but firm. He looked at me, then at Lily, and something in his expression shifted. Not recognition exactly, but something close. "I'm looking for Daniel Carter," he said. "That's me." I didn't answer right away. My grip on Lily's hand tightened slightly. "That's me," I said finally. "Who are you?" He took a breath, like he'd been preparing for this moment. "My name is Mark," he said, "and I think we need to talk. About your daughter." That's when something cold settled in my chest. People don't say things like that casually. I stepped forward, subtly positioning myself between him and Lily. "What about her?" I asked. He hesitated. His eyes flicked to Lily again, then back to me. "This might not be the best place," he said. "Maybe we should—" "No," I cut him off. "You showed up at my house. You can talk right here." There was a long pause. Then he said it. "I believe she's my daughter, too." For a second, I genuinely thought I'd misheard him, like my brain just refused to process the words. "What?" I said, almost laughing, but there was no humor in it. He didn't back down. "I'm serious," he said. "I have reason to believe that Lily is mine." I felt something snap inside me. "No," I said immediately. "No, that's not possible." My voice came out sharper than I intended, but I didn't care. "This isn't funny," I added. "I don't know what kind of game you think you're playing." "I'm not playing anything," he said quickly. "Look, I know how this sounds, I do, but I wouldn't be here if I wasn't sure." "Sure of what?" I shot back. "That you can just show up and make insane claims about a kid you've never met?" Lily was squeezing my hand tighter now. I could feel her looking up at me, confused, maybe a little scared. "Dad?" she said softly. I glanced down at her, forcing my expression to soften. "It's okay," I told her. "Go inside for a minute, all right? I'll be right there." She hesitated. "Go on," I said gently. She nodded and walked past us, glancing back once before disappearing into the house. The moment the door shut, I turned back to him. "You've got about 10 seconds to explain yourself before I call the cops," I said. He didn't flinch. Instead, he reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. "I didn't come here to cause trouble," he said. "I came because I just found out, and I needed to see for myself." He tapped something on the screen, then held it out toward me. "Her name was Rachel," he said quietly. My stomach dropped. "And I was with her, around the same time you were." For a second, I didn't even move. I just stood there on my own porch, staring at his phone like it was some kind of trick. Like if I blinked too hard, the whole situation would reset back to normal, and I'd just be a guy holding his keys, listening to his daughter talk about school projects. But nothing reset. Mark was still there, the blue sedan was still parked at the curb, the house next door still had their stupid wind chime clanking in the breeze, and Lily was inside, probably watching us through the blinds even though I told her not to. He kept holding his phone out like I was supposed to take it. "I'm not looking to blow up your life," he said quietly, "but I can't ignore what I found." I finally took the phone. The screen was already open to a photo album. At first it looked harmless, vacation shots, random selfies, a few blurry bar pictures. Then I saw her, Rachel. Same face I hadn't seen in years, except now it hit differently. Not memory anymore, something heavier, something real and present, like she could step out of the image and start talking again. My throat tightened before I even realized what I was looking at. "She told me her name was Rachel Hayes," he said. I didn't respond. I just kept scrolling, almost against my own will. There were photos of them together. Not a lot, but enough to tell a story I didn't know existed. A rooftop bar downtown, a kitchen I didn't recognize, a beach somewhere I couldn't place.
In one, she was laughing with her head tilted back, holding a drink like she didn't have a care in the world. The version of her I saw in those photos didn't match the version I remember toward the end. Or maybe it did, and I just never had the full picture. She and I were together off and on, Mark said, about 10 years ago. Phoenix, same city you said you were in. My grip tightened around his phone. Off and on? I repeated, flat. He nodded slowly. Yeah, it was complicated. She didn't really stay in one place emotionally. Sometimes she'd disappear for weeks, then come back like nothing happened. That part hit me harder than I wanted to admit, because it sounded familiar, too familiar. I handed the phone back to him like it burned me. This doesn't prove anything, I said. I know, he replied quickly. I know it doesn't. That's why I'm here. I let out a short, humorless laugh. So you just show up at my house and drop a bomb like this? You think I'm just gonna hand over my daughter because you saw some old photos? I'm not asking you to hand her over, he said. I'm asking for the truth. That word, truth, sat in my chest like a weight, because I had spent years building a version of truth that kept Lily safe, or at least what I thought was safe. Now this guy shows up and suddenly the ground under it feels less solid. I glanced toward the front door again. The curtain moved slightly. She was watching. I stepped forward just enough to block the view. You said around the same time, I said. What does that even mean? He hesitated. Then he said it anyway. She was seeing both of us, he said. I didn't know about you. Not at the time. I found out later she was living a completely different life when she wasn't with me. I felt my jaw tighten so hard it hurt. No, I said immediately. That's not... No, she wasn't like that. But even as I said it, I didn't sound as certain as I wanted to. Mark watched me carefully, like he was trying to read how much of me was about to break. I'm not saying this to attack her, he said. I'm saying it because timing matters here. Timing, I repeated bitterly. He nodded. Lily is 9, right? That made my stomach drop again. Don't say her name like that, I snapped. He raised his hand slightly. I'm sorry. Look, I did the math. I didn't want to at first, but I did it anyway. I couldn't ignore it. I stared at him, trying to keep my breathing steady. You did math, I said slowly. About my kid. I compared timelines, he corrected carefully. That's all. A part of me wanted to swing at him right there. Another part of me was stuck on something worse. The fact that he wasn't guessing randomly. He had thought this through enough to show up at my door. You're telling me, I said, my voice lower now, that you think she was pregnant while she was with you and also with me? He didn't answer immediately. That pause was an answer on its own. My mind started doing something I didn't want it to do. It started pulling up memories I hadn't touched in years. Rachel getting sick in the mornings, her disappearing moods, the way she sometimes looked at me like she was trying to remember something about her own life. I always told myself it was stress. Then Mark spoke again. I'm not here to accuse you of anything, he said. I'm just saying, I think there's a possibility I'm her biological father. The words landed heavier the second time. I looked past him down the street. A couple cars drove by like nothing in the world was happening. A dog barked somewhere behind a fence. Everything normal, everything untouched by what was happening on my porch. Meanwhile, my entire life was getting rewritten in real time. You think I've been raising someone else's kid, I said quietly. I think there's a chance, he replied. Yes. I nodded slowly, more to myself than him. Then I laughed again, but it came out strained. You can't just show up and say that, I said. You don't get to drop that on someone and stand there like it's a conversation. I know it's not normal, he said, but I didn't know how else to do it. I tried finding her first, Rachel. I couldn't. She disappeared from everything I had on her. Number changed, social's gone. I even tried old contacts. Of course she disappeared, I muttered under my breath. That part I believed. Rachel had always been good at vanishing when she wanted to. I rubbed my face with my hand, trying to think through the noise in my head. You said you were together off and on, I said again.
How long are we talking? Almost 2 years total, he said. Not straight, like I said, she would come and go. 2 years. That overlapped with me. I felt something twist inside my chest, because I remembered my timeline too. I remembered when she started getting distant,
I remembered the arguments, the night she didn't come home, the excuses I accepted because I didn't want to believe anything else. And I remembered the night Lily was conceived. Or at least what I thought I remembered. My certainty started cracking in places I didn't expect. I exhaled sharply and stepped off the porch, walking a few feet away from him like distance might help me think. "This is insane," I said more to myself than him. "I get it," he replied. "No, you don't," I snapped, turning back toward him. "You don't get it. That's my daughter in there. That's my life." "I'm not trying to take that away from you," he said quickly. "I swear I'm not. I just need to know if she's mine too." The way he said it, like he wasn't trying to erase me, made it worse somehow. Because it wasn't simple. It wasn't a guy showing up to steal a kid. It was something messier. Something that made space for doubt. And doubt was dangerous. I glanced back at the house again. The curtain had stopped moving. Lily was still there, probably trying to make sense of the tension she could feel but not understand. I turned back to Mark. "If you're wrong," I said slowly, "you don't just walk away from this like it never happened." He nodded immediately. "I understand." "You don't understand anything," I said. That came out harsher than I intended, but I didn't take it back. Because I meant it. He was standing in front of me trying to turn my world into a question mark, and I couldn't let that happen without answers. I pointed toward the street. "You're going to leave," I said, "right now." His face tightened slightly. "I get it, but no," I cut him off. "You're going to leave, and if you really believe what you're saying, you're going to do it the right way. Lawyers, DNA test, whatever you need, but not on my porch." He studied me for a long second. Then he nodded once. "Okay," he said quietly. "I didn't want it to be like this, but okay." He turned toward the street, walking slowly. Halfway to his car, he stopped and looked back. "I'm not trying to hurt you," he said, "but I think we both deserve the truth." Then he got in his car and drove away. I stood there until the sound of his engine disappeared completely. When I finally turned back toward the house, I felt like I was walking into something I didn't recognize anymore. Lily was waiting inside, and I had no idea what I was going to tell her. I didn't go inside right away. I stood on my own front lawn for a while after Mark left, just staring at the empty street like it might give me something useful if I waited long enough. The house felt different now, like it had absorbed the conversation and was holding on to it. Even the air felt heavier when I finally walked up the steps. Lily was sitting on the couch with the TV on, but the volume was low. She wasn't really watching it. She had that quiet, still posture kids get when they know something is wrong but don't have the language for it yet. The moment she saw me, she sat up a little straighter. "Who is that man?" she asked. I hesitated too long. That was my mistake. "Just someone asking questions," I said finally, forcing my voice to stay calm. Her eyes narrowed slightly. "About me?" "No," I said quickly, "not like that." She didn't look convinced, but she didn't push. Kids can tell when pushing won't get them anywhere. I sat down next to her, but I didn't really sit. I was there physically, but my mind was still stuck outside on the porch, replaying every word Mark had said, like it might rearrange itself into something less destructive. I kept thinking about Rachel, not the version I told myself existed, not even the version in the photos, the version I lived with at the end, the one who was already halfway gone before she physically left. That's what kept messing with me. Because if Mark was telling the truth about overlap, then I had to revisit every moment I had buried, every unexplained absence, every time she looked at me like she was somewhere else. And I hated how easily my brain started filling in gaps I never questioned before. That night, after Lily went to bed, I didn't sleep. I sat at the kitchen table with my phone in my hand, scrolling through old contacts I hadn't looked at in years. Rachel's number was gone. Of course it was gone. I had tried calling it 100 times after she left until it stopped ringing altogether. I opened old photos instead. Most of them were from when Lily was a baby, Rachel holding her, smiling in a way that looked real enough to trust. Me standing behind them, tired but proud in a way I didn't know how to express back then. It all looked normal. Too normal. Around 2 a.m., I finally did something I didn't want to do. I searched her name online. Nothing at first. Just old social media traces that went nowhere. A profile here, a broken link there. Then, buried under everything, I found something that made my stomach tighten. An obituary mention. Not for her. For her mother. Same last name she used to go by before she started changing it around. I clicked through pages of unrelated results until I found a small archive notice. Nothing dramatic, just a standard family listing, but there was a name connected to it, a possible relative, someone local to Arizona. It wasn't much, but it was something. And at that moment, I realized I wasn't just dealing with some stranger's claim anymore. I was starting to trace her like she was a missing person I had never actually understood. The next morning, I called in late to work for the first time in months. I dropped Lily off at school like nothing was wrong, but she kept looking at me like she could sense the shift in me.
Like kids do when the version of you they know starts glitching. As soon as I got back in the car, I called a lawyer. I didn't even know what I was asking for at first. I just said I needed advice about a custody-related paternity question. The receptionist transferred me twice before I landed with someone who actually sounded like they had done this before. Her name was Karen. She didn't sugarcoat anything. If someone is claiming paternity, she said over the phone, the only real answer is a DNA test. Everything else is speculation. I already knew that, but hearing it from someone else made it feel more real. What if I refuse? I asked. You can, she said, but if he pushes legally, a court can order it. That part hit harder than I expected, because suddenly this wasn't just a confrontation on my porch. It was something that could pull Lily into paperwork, hearings, strangers asking questions about her life. I told Karen I needed time. After I hung up, I just sat in my car for a while without starting it. My phone buzzed twice, unknown number. I ignored it the first time. It rang again. Against my better judgment, I answered. There was a pause on the other end. Then, Mark's voice. I didn't think you'd pick up, he said. I gripped the steering wheel. Stop calling me, I said immediately. I just wanted to check in, he replied. I've been thinking about what you said. There's nothing to think about, I snapped. A beat of silence. Then he said, I found her. My entire body went still. For a second, I thought I misheard him. What? I said. Rachel, he said. I found her. That was the moment everything inside me shifted again. Not disbelief this time. Something sharper. Something like dread mixed with something I didn't want to name. Where? I asked. He hesitated. She's still in Phoenix. I leaned back in my seat slowly. No, I said. That's not possible. She's under a different name, he continued. Different address. But I confirmed it through an old mutual contact. She didn't disappear like I thought. She just changed everything. I felt my grip tighten on the phone. You've been looking for her, I said. Yes, he admitted, since I left your house. Without talking to me? You hung up on me, he said. Not defensive, just factual. That stung more than I expected. I closed my eyes for a second. What did she say? I asked finally. She hasn't responded, he said. I sent a message. I haven't gone in person yet. Of course you haven't, I muttered, but my mind was already moving ahead of me. Rachel was alive, in Phoenix, not missing, not gone, just hidden. And that changed everything again, because now there were three realities colliding in my head. The life I thought I had with her, the version Mark claimed he had with her, and the version of her that was still out there, somewhere, refusing to face either of us. Why are you so obsessed with this? I asked him finally. There was a pause before he answered. Because I keep thinking about her, he said quietly. About how she left. About how she never explained anything. And now there's a kid involved who could be mine, and I can't just pretend that doesn't matter. I looked out through the windshield at nothing in particular. You don't get to just insert yourself into my daughter's life, I said. I'm not trying to, he replied again, calmer than I felt. I just want confirmation. That's it. Confirmation doesn't fix anything, I said. No, he agreed, but it changes what's real. That line stuck with me long after the call ended. That night, I didn't tell Lily anything. I acted normal, cooked dinner, asked about school, helped her with homework like I always did. But every time she laughed, I felt this strange distance growing between what I knew and what I feared. Later, after she went to bed, I pulled out an old box from the closet. Photos, documents, hospital records from when she was born. I went through everything like I was trying to find a mistake buried in paper. Her birth certificate was there. My name was on it. I stared at it longer than I should have, because I knew, logically, that paperwork doesn't always tell the full story. But emotionally, it was the only thing holding the ground steady under me. My phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Mark. It was a text from an unknown number. Just one line. She never told you everything. No name, no context, just that. I sat there in the dark kitchen staring at it until my eyes started to ache. And for the first time since this started, I stopped wondering if Mark was lying. I started wondering what Rachel was still hiding. I didn't sleep that night either.
I tried, I really did. I laid in bed staring at the ceiling while the house stayed quiet around me, listening to Lily breathe in the next room like it was the only steady thing left in my life. But every time I closed my eyes, I saw that text again. She never told you everything. It didn't matter who sent it anymore. My brain had already decided it meant something. That's the thing about uncertainty. It doesn't wait for proof. It just keeps growing. By morning, I made a decision I didn't say out loud to anyone. I called Karen again, the lawyer, and told her I wanted to do the DNA test. There was a pause on the line, like she was making sure I understood what I was saying. "Are you agreeing voluntarily?" she asked. "Yes," I said. "And the other party. I'll deal with him." That was the first time I said it out loud. Him. Mark. Not a stranger anymore. Not just a random guy on my porch. Something more complicated than that now. She told me where to go for a certified testing center in Phoenix. Standard procedure. Nothing dramatic. Just paperwork, swabs, waiting. After I hung up, I sat in my car outside the house for almost 20 minutes before going back inside. Lily was already getting ready for school. She looked at me like she always did, like I was still predictable.
But I wasn't. That was the problem. I drove her to school in silence for most of the ride. She noticed. "Are you mad at me?" she asked at one point. That question hit me harder than anything Mark had said. I forced a smile. "No, I'm just tired." She nodded slowly, like she didn't fully believe me, but she let it go. When I dropped her off, she hugged me longer than usual. I stood there watching her walk into the building, backpack bouncing slightly, like nothing in the world had shifted under her feet, but everything had shifted under mine. I didn't go home after that. I drove straight toward Phoenix. Mark had texted me the address of the testing facility earlier that morning without me asking. I didn't respond, but I still used it. That annoyed me more than anything, that he was already positioned inside the situation like he belonged there. The building was one of those clinical-looking offices in a business park. Glass doors, beige walls, too clean waiting room. Everything designed to make something deeply personal feel like paperwork. Mark was already there when I arrived. Of course he was. He stood up as soon as he saw me, like he'd been waiting for hours, even though I knew it hadn't been that long. "I wasn't sure you'd actually come," he said. I didn't answer. I just walked past him into the building. He followed. Inside, they checked our IDs, explained the process like we were strangers, connected by a form instead of a child. That word kept echoing in my head the whole time. Child. Not theory, not possibility. A real person in the middle of all this. We sat in silence while they collected the samples. It was fast, too fast. A cotton swab in the mouth, and suddenly everything you thought you knew about your life could be reduced to percentages on a piece of paper. When it was done, the nurse told us it would take a few days. Mark nodded like he understood patience. I didn't. Outside, the air felt heavier than it had when I went in. He leaned against the side of the building, arms crossed. "I know you don't trust me," he said. "That's an understatement," I replied. He didn't react to that. "I'm not your enemy," he said. I let out a short laugh. "You showed up at my house and told me my daughter might not be mine. What exactly do you think that makes you?" He looked down for a moment. "I think it makes me someone who got left in the dark too," he said quietly. That stopped me for a second. Because as much as I didn't want to admit it, that part was true. If what he believed was real, then Rachel hadn't just disappeared from me. She had built parallel lives and walked away from both of us. "I found her," he said again after a moment. "After your call the other day." My jaw tightened. "I told you not to contact her." "I didn't ask for permission," he said. Not aggressively, just matter of fact. I needed answers. "And did you get them?" I asked. He hesitated. That hesitation again.
That same pause that always came before something I wasn't going to like. "She agreed to meet," he said. My stomach dropped slightly. "When?" I asked. "Tonight," he replied. I stared at him for a long second. "You're unbelievable," I said. "I'm trying to resolve this," he said. "You're dragging her into this before we even have results." He shook his head slightly. "She's already in it. She was always in it." That sentence stuck with me longer than I wanted it to. Because the more I thought about it, the more I realized he wasn't wrong. None of this started with him. It started years ago. We were just late to the consequences. I didn't say anything else. I got back in my car and drove.
I told myself I was going home. I wasn't. I followed the address Mark sent me anyway. It was a small apartment complex on the edge of Phoenix. Older buildings, faded paint, the kind of place people ended up when they were trying to disappear without fully leaving a city behind. I parked a few spaces away and just sat there. I didn't even know why I came. I told myself I wasn't going to confront her. I told myself I was just making sure she existed, that she was real and not just a ghost we were both chasing. But then I saw her, Rachel, walking out of one of the units. She looked older, but not dramatically different. Same hair, pulled back loosely. Same posture, like she was always halfway prepared to leave somewhere. She stopped when she saw Mark first. Then she saw me. For a moment, none of us moved. That silence outside the building felt louder than anything I'd ever heard. Mark was the first to speak. "You should have told us," he said. Rachel exhaled slowly, like she'd been holding her breath for years and just forgot how to release it. "I didn't know how," she said simply. I got out of the car at that point. I couldn't stay in it anymore. "You didn't know how?" I repeated, walking toward her. "You left. You disappeared. You let me raise a kid alone, and you're telling me you didn't know how to explain it?" Her eyes flicked to mine, and for a second I saw something in her face I hadn't seen before. Not defensiveness, not anger, exhaustion. "I was falling apart," she said quietly. "That's not an answer," I snapped. "I know," she said. Mark looked between us like he wasn't sure where he belonged in the conversation anymore. Rachel finally stepped back and gestured for us to come inside. "I'm not doing this out here," she said. Inside the apartment, everything was too ordinary. A couch, a small kitchen, a couple of framed pictures I didn't recognize. Nothing dramatic. Nothing that matched what my mind had built up over the last few days. She sat down like her legs were tired. "I didn't leave because I didn't love her," she said immediately, before either of us could speak. "Then why?" I asked. Her eyes dropped to her hands. "Because I didn't know who I was," she said. Mark scoffed slightly. "That's not—" "It is," she cut in, sharper than before.
You both want a clean answer. There isn't one. I felt my patience break slightly. There's a child involved, I said. There has to be something closer to a real explanation than that. She nodded slowly. "I was seeing both of you," she said finally. "I wasn't proud of it. I wasn't trying to build anything honest with either of you at that point. I was just existing badly." The room went quiet again. Mark spoke first. "You knew there was a chance," he said, "with the timing." "I didn't know," she replied immediately. "I wasn't tracking anything like that. I was barely holding myself together." My mind kept circling back to the same thing. "Lily, that doesn't answer the question that matters," I said quietly. Rachel looked at me. I could tell she already knew what I was asking. "Who is her father?" I said. The silence after that was different, heavier, final in a way the earlier silence wasn't. Rachel took a slow breath. "I didn't know for sure," she admitted. Mark straightened slightly. "We did a test," he said quickly. "Today. It's being processed." She nodded, like she already expected that. "I know," she said. That made both of us stop. "You know?" I repeated. "I've known there was a chance for years," she said quietly. "I just didn't want to confirm it while everything was already broken." My heart started beating harder. "And?" I said. "What do you think it is?" She looked at me for a long moment. "I think you already know," she said softly. That wasn't an answer, but it felt like one. The waiting after that was the worst part. Not the confrontation, not the arguments, the waiting. 2 days later, Karen called me. I pulled over immediately when I saw her name on my phone. Her voice was calm, professional, like always. "I have the results," she said. I didn't speak. "You want me to tell you over the phone?" she asked. "No," I said immediately. "Just tell me." There was a pause. Then she said it. "You are the biological father." I sat there in silence for a long time after she finished speaking. Not because I was surprised, because I wasn't. Some part of me already knew the answer before anyone confirmed it. When I finally hung up, I didn't feel relief. I didn't feel victory. I just felt exhausted in a way I couldn't explain. That night, I picked Lily up from school early. She ran to me like nothing had changed,
and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like my life was splitting in half when she grabbed my hand. It still hurt, but it was mine again.